first off, if you want to just quickly introduce yourself and tell our audience a
Yeah,
little bit about your story and like your background.
sure. My name is Matt Bocchi. I'm an author and a speaker. I've been telling my story for the last 5 years. I do it really to make a difference because I realize how many kids, especially today in this day and age, post COVID too, are struggling. Um, my story involves the loss of my dad 9/11, going through sexual trauma after my dad died, my descent into drug and alcohol addiction, and then of course my overcoming of all of that and getting sober and getting help. And for me, especially with being going through what I went through as a teenage boy and just knowing how hard it can be for young men to grow up in this society, I really emphasize and try my best to talk about mental health and what it can do on adolescent boys, especially, right? And the fact that many of them, in my opinion, need help. And I think it's extremely important to talk about and not be afraid to talk about what we're going through, right? And not be afraid of being judged. I think it takes a true sign of humility, of strength to talk about our struggles, especially as men. We're kind of ingrained not to do that, right? I think it's the opposite. It's not weakness; it's strength to talk about it. So that's a big part of my mission and what I'm trying to do. Um, and I think that one by one and day by day, I can make an impact. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the last time you saw us, or I guess saw him, was at our school at Ransom, and that was when we were first starting the Push Forward project. So we wanted to ask you like what you've been up to since then.
Yeah. So I was at Ransom in April. My speaking schedule kind of ended a little bit earlier than it normally does this year, which was nice. But I mean, really for me, going into this summer, especially, I mean, it's always scheduling for the next year. But I I'm working on a second book, and that's kind of taken up some more of my free time. Um, I'm coming up on 10 years sober this week, so that's been like a big focal point. With like celebration meetings where I'm picking up my coin and all that stuff, like, going out to dinner with my wife, like just little things. Um, and really just trying my best. Honestly, I'm not really too good at it sometimes, but I'm trying my best to recharge a little bit this summer, take care of myself, put myself first. I have a really hard time doing that. Um, I feel like work's always on my mind. So like I'm trying my best to put my mental and my physical health forward and first right now. And that's been my goal.
Well, congratulations. That's a huge
Yeah.
achievement, and I can't even
Thank you.
imagine how many lives you could be helping or saving with that book that you're making now.
Thank you,
So,
man.
I just want to ask. You already talked about this a little bit, but what originally
Yeah.
motivated you to start sharing your story publicly?
So I was about 9 months sober. I spoke at an AA meeting, and I had this guy come up to me after the meeting and ask me if I would be willing to share my story at some schools he was going into in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. And there was no money or anything like that. And he just said, we'd come in, we tell I'll tell my story, you can tell your story. And so I started doing that. And when I first started doing that, I never talked about, like, in my opinion, like the deepest parts of my story, the story, the parts of my experience that I felt I was judging myself over, truthfully. Um, so a couple months into it, I'm at a school in New Hampshire, and I have a kid walk up to me because I for the first time ever, I talked about being abused. And I didn't really plan it and never really plan it, but it kind of just came out organically. And this young man came up to me after, and he was like, "I want to let you know you saved my life." And hearing those words, I was like just so taken aback. Um, and he was like, "You really should consider writing a book." And I said to him, he was like, "You saved my life, and I want you to let you know you're probably saving others." And I cut him off, and I was like, "I'm not even a year sober. I'm trying to save my life right now, but thank you." And he goes, "You really should consider writing a book telling your story." And again, like, kind of awestruck at him saying this to me, I was like, "Thank you. Yeah, I'll consider it." And I always used to write. I always was a good writer, but like I always used to journal, always used to write. Um, and just the actual putting pen to paper for me as a child was always very cathartic for me. So that summer I started doing it. I didn't even have a laptop. I had pawned every single thing that was of value, pretty much, except for a couple things that were really sacred to me that I would never consider doing that. Right. So I didn't even have a laptop. I borrowed my brother's laptop. I started writing my book. I started actually handwriting chapters, and I just felt a release in doing it. Um, never expected this to go where it went. Never expected my recovery in many regards to go where it went. I never expected it to become so public either. And then I get a book deal. And fast forward to when that book is coming out, which was almost 5 years ago. I'm doing all this big TV stuff, radio tours where I'm on a computer system where I'm getting plugged into each network, speaking to like 200 plus radio stations in like 5 hours, right? Just plugging me in 5 minute, 10 minute interviews at a time. And I started getting all this traction and this buzz, and all these schools started reaching out to me, especially in New Jersey where I was still living. And I just took full advantage of it. I mean, it didn't come overnight to me. It took a lot of grit to get to this point. But now it's, I'm extremely fortunate and grateful that this is my life. Like, this is my career and this is what I'm doing. And to me, the vulnerability is what's, I think, is what's helping kids get honest too. No one wants to talk about the difficult stuff that happens to them. No one wants to talk about what they're going through. But when you see someone who's kind of similar to you talking about it, and you could say, well, maybe I'm not alone, I think it inspires someone to speak up. And so, yeah, I mean, I moved down to South Florida with my wife almost 3.5 years ago. My wife's from Miami. And getting connected with a lot of the Miami schools has been absolutely amazing for me, because I see a lot of myself in guys like you. I see a lot of myself in a lot of the schools I've gone to so far down here, because I think there's just this same pressure that I had as a child, to excel and to achieve all the status and get all these things. And like, we live in areas where there's people driving nice cars and all this stuff. And so you have this pressure to like obtain those things, and that means success. And like, I just think it's much greater than that, So, anyway, that's a little bit about what inspired me to start doing this.
Yeah, I feel like forming a bond and like a relation with the people you're talking to is huge. That's one of the things that we're trying to do with skateboarding. We're trying to show them that there are other people who are skateboarding and aren't doing drugs. There are people that are using skateboarding as a method of prevention, and that could be pretty impactful in someone's life, I feel like.
I completely agree. And I just think that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least for me, when I was in high school, you start approaching high school and you already have this, and I know it's gotten younger, right? I mean, when I was in 8th grade, 7th grade, my friends had or siblings that were in high school drinking, and we would see them partying, and we'd see them drinking, and we thought it was so cool, want to be just like them. And I know for a fact that it's gotten younger and younger, right? And I know it's starting now with vaping and all that stuff, but for me, it's like, why is there this immediate thought that the moment you get to high school, the moment you get to 8th grade, you got to start drinking, you got to start smoking to have fun, And look, my friends and I fell victim to it too. The same kids that I was friends with since I was 7, 8 years old, all of a sudden we got to high school and we said, well, yeah, maybe drugs and alcohol would make it more fun. And I will never forget, man, like, me and my two best friends, one of which would go to the parties with us. He would drive because he got his license earlier than us. And even the nights that he wasn't driving, we'd laugh, poke fun at him sometimes because he didn't want to drink or he didn't want to smoke. And like, to me, he had like this charm, I always envied that. Like, he had this confidence in himself that he didn't care what anyone thought about him. Like, I didn't have that as a kid. Honestly, as an adult, like, I still care about what people think about me at times, I don't really hold that true when I go to a school, because I know that high school kids especially can be tough. And like, I know that when you're hearing my story, for instance, like, there's a lot of heavy stuff. So kids will automatically like resort to like laughing as a first instinct, right? I never take that personally. It's just them being uncomfortable, right? But I don't really care about what other people think of me. It's like, I start thinking about what I think about myself and how I view myself. And then I start thinking about what other people think of me. You know what I mean? So, look, at your age, to be able to find an outlet, a healthy outlet, I tip my cap, man. I commend you guys so much, because you are paving the way for kids just like you, who are also feeling that same pressure, whether it's peer pressure, whether it's society. Oh, now I'm approaching high school. Now I'm a sophomore. Now it's like, okay, maybe we should start drinking at the parties, right? Go out on the boat and smoke, whatever. Like, and so I don't know. I just think that it's just a part of how we've kind of approached it as a society too. Parents in my life, my friends' parents, they'd all have us drink at their house. They thought it was because, we're in a safe environment, right? I think many of them kind of enabled us for a while, right? So, and I'm sure a lot of you see that same exact thing too happening at your school or schools that you're friends with, the kids that go to those schools. You know what I mean? So, um, anyway, for the kids that can say no at your age, I have a, a lot of respect, plain and simple.
Thank you.
What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with addiction and doesn't really know what to do?
High school, or um, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to go to someone that you trust, whether it's a friend, whether it's a loved one, someone at your school, and tell them that you're going through it. I think that the idea around getting help is what scares so many people. It's what scared me. And I was afraid when I was in high school that if I came forward about my own struggles, my own addiction, that I would be ostracized or I would get in trouble. And like, I think that now, especially with some of the schools around here, we've done a much better job of getting kids the help they need. And so I would encourage them as much as possible to get the help that they need and don't be afraid of the repercussions that come with it. You know, it's like the negative that they the negative that we perceive is going to happen is usually never that bad, if that makes sense, right? And so my biggest piece of advice is find someone you can trust and then tell them that you're going through it and that maybe you need some help. You know, I think that a lot of kids kind of already have that person in mind and that friend too. If someone approaches me and says, "Look, I'm vaping too much, I'm hitting my cart too much," like whatever the case may be, like sit down as a friend and hold them accountable and get them the help that they need. You know, um, that's my advice.
Well, for organizations like us, substance abuse awareness organizations, fighting addiction, stuff like that, what do you recommend that we do to actually make sure we're making an impact on young minds?
Well, I think the follow up is very important. I think that it's very at times simple to get someone maybe the immediate help that they need, right? And for me, that looked like getting me into detox facilities and things like that, but not doing anything to check me at like, what are you doing further to help yourself? What are you doing for your mental health? Are you going to therapy? Are you seeking outlets that are healthier than drugs and alcohol? Right. And so for me, like it took about 2 years into my sobriety where I was seeing a therapist that I actually trusted, that I could really confide in. And then it took me another few years after that to start experimenting with trauma therapy. And like those two outlets in and of themselves helped me tremendously. I wouldn't still be sober today without it, truthfully. And I'm very connected with 12-step programs. But to me, it's about the additional follow up. It's about the continuing sobriety. It's about the continuing help, the continuous focus on mental health, right? Not just the immediate. Let's get someone some get them into therapy, get them into detox, get them, you know what I mean? It's continuing to follow up and making sure that they're still doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. I also have like several friends who were big skaters when I was growing up. And like when we got to high school, it was, I mean, I'm sure you see it a lot in the culture down here too, but up there it was a big smoking culture. Um, and so like there was like, in my opinion, there was just that inherent pull for some of them to try to, I mean, we still at that point, a lot of us were still experimenting with weed, but like a lot more of my friends were really smoking exponentially more than they used to smoke because they were connected with older skaters who were smoking. And so like I think you're doing a good job. And I also think that you're kind of hitting two different people, two different groups of people at once, you know? So I love it.
Thank you. We appreciate that a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Before we end the meeting, we wanted to ask if you could leave our audience with just one message about healing or hope or just coping in general.
I think that healing and I'll say grieving too, a part of this, right? But for me, I viewed my journey as concentric circles, right? Like where you have numerous circles building up into a bigger piece. The grief being in the middle of that circle, that first circle, right? The grief being that first circle. And the moment you get further, further, and further away from that event, you think that you're kind of healed from it, that you've grown, that you've moved on. But I have seen that like one little ripple, one little drop of water can connect me right back to that moment again. And so my biggest thing and what I try to leave people with in the takeaway is that it's okay to not be okay, and do not ever fault yourself for taking as much time as you need. Realize that grief, healing, recovery in general, whether it's from addiction, whether it's from alcoholism, self-harm, whatever the case may be, mental health, you're going to have days that are not the best days, you know? But remember why you're doing it in the first place, what you're trying to seek. And to me today, it's that relief without drugs and alcohol, right? It's being okay with who I am, being comfortable in my own skin, even though I'll look at myself in the mirror and not like what I see. It's just being confident that I'm me, I'm unique, and I'm different, and that's okay. And so again, like, I just think that healing and going through adversities and going through struggles, it's not a one size fits all. Some people are able to move on quicker than others and never let it affect them again. Other people, it's going to continue to be there no matter how far away you get from it, and it's okay that that's the case. And that's my experience. So
All right, thank you so much.
you're very welcome, guys. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course. All right, I hope you have a good one.
Have a good
You
one.
too. Bye, guys.
Bye.